came across something titled, "What is a Person?" written by a young boy who was asked to write an essay on the topic. Here's what he came up with. When you are a person, your head is pretty round and firm, containing your brain and covered with hair. On your head's front, you have a face, which is where you eat and make expressions. Your neck is what holds your head above your collar, and it tends to be difficult to keep clean. Your shoulders act like small shelves for hanging your suspenders, while your stomach is something that aches if you don't eat enough. Your spine is a long bone in your back that stays behind you no matter how fast you turn. You need your arms for throwing the ball and reaching things like butter and chocolates. Your fingers protrude from your hands so that you can do arithmetic. Your legs are used for running and your toes inevitably get stubbed. That's all there is to you on the outside, except for what's inside, and that I haven't seen yet. There is a lot within us that remains unseen. Even surgeons who operate on the brain, abdomen, or heart don't see it. It's a part of who we are. It's the core of our identity. Jesus referred to this in verse 45 of our text when he said, "The good person brings forth good from the good stored up in their heart, and the evil person brings forth evil from the evil stored up. For the mouth speaks what the heart is full of." Today I am posing a crucial question. How is it with your soul? This question will guide and center our thoughts as we reflect on our scripture passage today. The first word that jumps out of the text is hypocrite. He must have shouted it, "You hypocrite!" If not a shout, it was definitely a loud, firm challenge. "You hypocrite, first remove the log from your own eye, and then you will see clearly to remove the speck from your neighbor's eye." How is it with your soul? There are many directions we could explore in response to this question, but I will focus on hypocrisy. How is it with your soul? Perhaps reflecting on the word hypocrite will help us answer. One type of hypocrisy involves expecting others to uphold higher standards than we set for ourselves. Consider this common example. Isn't it true that many people, perhaps most, expect clergy to adhere to a higher standard of behavior than they follow themselves? This was highlighted vividly a couple of years ago by two high-profile events. A notable case that highlights disparities in accountability involved a prominent spiritual leader revered by millions who was convicted of serious criminal charges, including financial fraud, resulting in a lengthy prison sentence due to the gross misuse of resources and a breach of trust. In contrast, a well-known industrialist was implicated in a corporate scandal involving financial discrepancies and unethical practices that caused significant losses to the employees and investors. Despite the severity of the consequences, the businessman faced relatively lenient repercussions compared to the spiritual leader. This stark comparison raises questions about the differing levels of accountability imposed on individuals based on their social standing and influence within the community, showcasing the inconsistency in ethical expectations and judicial outcomes. I was outraged by what the spiritual guru did. His hypocrisy was revolting, and his indulgent behavior seemed vulgar to me. However, the two crimes were punished differently. I believe this difference was due to higher expectations placed on the spiritual leader compared to the businessman, because the spiritual leader was a preacher of morals and spirituality. I'm not suggesting what the sentences should have been, as I felt just as angry and disgusted by his actions as everyone else. But the point remains, it's hypocritical to expect others to uphold higher standards than we set for our own behavior. So I ask you, how is it with your soul? Another form of hypocrisy is noticing a flaw in someone else that you fail to recognize in yourself. Modern psychologists refer to this as projection. The analogy of the beam in your eye, which Jesus mentioned, predates the contemporary understanding. Mark Trotter, in his book Before You Say, says, in modern psychology, projection is the idea that the faults we criticize in others are often those we dislike in ourselves. It's commonly believed that having a beam in our eye prevents us from seeing the speck in another person's eye. However, that's not true. Having a beam in your own eye does not impair your vision. Ironically, it enhances it. It allows you to notice the speck in someone else's eye. Most people are not bothered by a speck in someone else's eye. But if you've got a beam in your own, you are more likely to look for specks in other people's eyes. Be cautious. Earlier in the 6th chapter of Luke, Jesus warned, "Do not judge, and you will not be judged. Do not condemn, and you will not be condemned." Therefore, we must be mindful. How is your soul doing? Are you recognizing faults in others that you ignore in yourself? That's a sign of hypocrisy. After advising listeners against judging and condemning, Jesus continued by saying, "Forgive so that you may be forgiven." The attitudes of a Christian should be one of compassion, not of condemnation. We all have to reflect on this. How is it with your soul? The third type of hypocrisy is a lack of integrity. Integrity implies being whole and complete. You may have heard of Sister Rani Maria, an Indian Catholic nun, well known for her life of service and commitment. She demonstrated immense integrity and dedication to the poor and marginalized. One poignant example of her integrity was her work with the Adivasi tribes and impoverished communities in the state of Madhya Pradesh in India. Sister Rani Maria was deeply committed to social justice and the empowerment of these marginalized groups. She worked tirelessly to organize self-help groups, promote employment opportunities, and help the poor access essential resources and rights. Sister Rani Maria faced numerous threats and opposition from those who felt threatened by her effort to uplift the poor, particularly from moneylenders and landlords whose exploitative practices she challenged. Despite these threats, she remained steadfast in her mission. She believed in non-violence and forgiveness, embodying the values of compassion and service. Her integrity shone brightly even as she faced danger. Tragically, she was murdered in 1995 by a man hired by those who opposed her work. Even in the moment of her death, she reportedly pronounced words of forgiveness towards her assailants. This act of forgiving those who harmed her further exemplifies her profound integrity and commitment to her values, making her life and legacy an inspiring testament to her unwavering faith and dedication to serving humanity regardless of the consequences. Integrity involves staying true to yourself, adhering to your highest values, and being faithful to your profession as a Christian. A lack of integrity is a form of hypocrisy. So, how is it with your soul? Here's a concluding thought. Many of us struggle with hypocrisy, or to put it more gently, we find ourselves guilty of it at certain times in our lives, perhaps more often than we acknowledge. This is just one indicator of our spiritual well-being. We need a power greater than ourselves to rise above hypocrisy and maintain spiritual health. That's why we must rely on the power of the Holy Spirit and nurture our connection to Christ within us. In her book, The Writing Life, Annie Dillard shares an encounter with a sphinx moth, which resembles what we call a bumblebee, big body, tiny wings. Its design contradicts aerodynamic principles, yet it still manages to fly. Their method of flight is very distinct. They fill themselves with oxygen, taking deep breaths and inhaling as much air as they can. It's like they are panting even more intensely than a tired hunting dog. Once they have taken in enough air and expanded themselves with oxygen, they take off and soar. Annie Dillard encountered one of these sphinx moths on the deck rail of a ship. Startled before it was ready to fly, the moth moved up and down repeatedly before finally plummeting into the sea, unable to remain airborne. This serves as a metaphor for our lives. Because we fail to breathe in the Spirit's power and nurture the presence of Christ within us, we experience ups and downs, falling in and out of hypocrisy and living below our true potential. How is it with your soul? Are you empowered by the Spirit? May Jesus Christ be praised.